First thing is you got to understand the case. You have to read every single thing, and you have to know the facts of this case like the back of your hand. You have to. What am I looking for here? Well, I'm thinking about a trial. When we go to trial, if that's where we end up, the prosecution, the government, the people in charge of the police, they're the ones in charge of proving the case, right? They have to go first. The Constitution says we don't have to say anything. We don't have to call any witnesses. We can just sit there. We're presumed innocent. So when the trial starts, it's not 0 points for the prosecution, 0 points for the defense. It's like the defense gets spotted 10 touchdowns and the prosecution has to try to come back and beat them. That's what presumed innocent means. You get spotted a huge lead before the thing starts, and that's how they're supposed to look at it. So only if the prosecution's case is so good that it would have been such a comeback that the prosecution came back from 7 touchdowns behind and still beat you, it's that much of a slam dunk should you get convicted. But when I get up, what I want to be able to point to is a reasonable doubt. Because the judge will tell the jury that the prosecution has to prove its case beyond a reasonable doubt. A means 1. You don't have to show up with 10 reasonable doubts. You just have to show up with 1. What's a doubt? A question. Something that you don't know the answer to. Something that they haven't given you the answer to. A doubt. A reasonable one. One that's important. So, what I'm going to be able to do is highlight to the jury 1 substantial unanswered question, at least. And say, here, jury, here's a question that I'm telling you was unanswered. It's a question and it's important, and there's no answer to it. And because that's the way it is, you should acquit. I hear all kinds of lawyers focus on the evidence. Hey, we're going to attack the cell tower data. It ain't happening. Hey, we're going to say there isn't a lot of evidence. You ain't going to get anywhere. There's a ton of evidence. But the focus isn't. The Constitution doesn't say, find him guilty if there's a lot of evidence. The Constitution says, find him guilty if he's guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. You don't have the manpower to go out there and match them. That's why the deck is stacked against you. It's not even. That's why this isn't even. It's supposed to be easier for somebody to be acquitted. Where does this standard come from? Well, the only way that you can be 1,000% certain of something is to have been there. Nobody that's sitting on that jury was at the house that night. If they were at the house that night, they can't be jurors. Because if you have personal knowledge of the facts, you're disqualified and you can't serve as a juror. So you can't tell the jurors, only find them guilty if you're 1,000% certain, because none of them can be 1,000% certain because they weren't there. But what's the next best thing? Find them guilty unless there's a reasonable doubt. In other words, they're telling you to be as certain as you can possibly be given that you weren't there. And if there's one question that you can't answer that's important, then you should acquit them. So when I'm going through this evidence, that's what I'm looking for. What am I going to tell the jury is my reasonable doubt so that he can be acquitted? I'm not seeing a connection between Kohberger and the kids. Why would Kohberger go kill these 4 kids? What's the reason? It's not a jealous boyfriend. He wasn't trying to rob them. He wasn't pissed off at them. Because again, we have no evidence that they even knew who he was. It's just random. Some jurors might think people don't kill people for just no reason at all. So if there's no motive, if there's no connection at all, that to me is enough for me to say, I don't think this guy did it. That's a reasonable doubt. So that might be a theory. Another thing is, if it's Kohberger, if it's just a guy, a Jason Voorhees out because he wants to kill people, why didn't he kill the other 2 people in the house? Why did he leave 2 people alive? Because if it's just a random person who wasn't targeting people but just wanted to go out and kill people, why wouldn't he kill everybody in the house? Maybe to some people, that's a reasonable doubt. Maybe some people will refuse to convict somebody because nobody could say that they saw him and put him at the scene. Maybe to them that's a reasonable doubt. Maybe to someone else, it's a reasonable doubt that even though we have all this phone evidence, nobody has any records of that phone being at the scene during that time. Maybe to them, that's a reasonable doubt. Maybe some people say, look, I see all this circumstantial evidence, but murder, that's as big of a charge as they come. And because it's a murder case, I just can't convict on this type of evidence. Maybe they think that way. For them, that's a reasonable doubt. There's 12 people sitting on a jury. Each juror is supposed to make its own decision. Juror B isn't supposed to just go with whatever Juror A says. Juror B is supposed to look at this independently. So you can see the way the system is set up. One unanswered question. 12 people can have 12 different unanswered questions. And that's an acquittal. They don't have to have the same unanswered question, and they should be looking at it independently. That's why, if the system works like it's supposed to, and the jurors apply the law correctly, if somebody's convicted, that's as close to certain as you can get. 12 people looked at this for themselves and decided, hey, you know what? I don't even have one unanswered question about this guy's guilt. That's the way it's supposed to work. You've been sitting in trial for a week or 2 weeks, away from your family, away from your job. You don't really want to be here. You missed working out for 2 weeks. And you want to go home. You're tired of being here. You're tired of the courtroom. It was fun at first. Now it sucks. Peanut butter and jelly sandwiches aren't doing it for you. Jimmy John's was great because you hadn't had it for a while, and now you're sick of it. You just want to go home. We're at the end of the trial. Now's when you earn your money. You're looking at this and you're like, you know what? I think it's a big deal that he didn't know who those people were. I think it's a big deal that there's no evidence that they ever communicated or even ever saw each other before that night. I'm not good. And 11 people are looking at you like, come on, dude. Jimmy John sucks. I want to go back home. I don't want to be here anymore. Like, what do you mean? And you have to stick to your guns. But that's what the Constitution requires. But that's what people can't do. So we get wrongful convictions all the time. Do people really understand the burden of proof? I don't know. I have my doubts. It's difficult. You have to listen. Do people really want to dig underneath if the dude looks like a creep? I don't know. Are people going to feel sorry for these four? Of course. These are young people who needlessly lost their lives. They have families. Everybody's affected. We all know that. But that shouldn't change. All of that, those emotions shouldn't change what you're supposed to be applying. Lady Justice, if you look at a statue, has a blindfold on. In other words, it doesn't matter if you're a creep and she's holding a scale. She's weighing the evidence. Is there a substantial unanswered question? That's the only thing that these jurors should be looking for. That's how the system is supposed to work. That's what I'd be doing. That's what I'd be trying to sell to the jury.